If you really consider yourself a leader, what choice are you making and how you are providing safe spaces for everyone who is looking to you to lead, to show up in their genius, authentically who they are, to be able to delve into those skills and aptitudes and everything that they can bring for you and for them. Welcome to this week's episode of The Rutledge Perspective. And this week, which is just apropos, we are going to talk about the freedom of choice. I happen to be recording this particular episode on June 19th, 2023, or Juneteenth, as now it's a national holiday. And it's been a holiday or a celebratory type of day in Texas since 1865. When enslaved persons found out about the Emancipation Proclamation here in Texas, in Galveston. And I started thinking about that whole idea of freedom, as many people are calling it, Freedom Day, and what it really means to have freedom. There's financial freedom, there is physical freedom, there is spiritual freedom, right? There's all kinds of freedom. There's mindset freedom. How do you free your mind from the shackles of oppression, depression, imposter syndrome, all the things. And when we think about freedom and business and leadership, the piece that comes to mind most rapidly for me and strongest for me is the freedom of choice. The freedom of choice. And I've talked before about the fact that we all have choices. We are not free from the consequences of our choices. Well, most of us are not free from the consequences of our choices, but we are free to make the choices that we want to make. And as leaders, that means your people are also free to make the choices that they feel are the right choices for them. Hopefully within the guidelines that you have set and the expectations you have set around your business or your organization or your department or what have you. But they are free to choose how to show up, when to show up, where to show up, whether to show up, and in showing up, how they engage. We all have choices. And we have choices whether or not to feed into the rhetoric that is pushed upon us or thrust upon us in some ways. The fact that we actually have to have laws put in place so we can't be discriminated against by the way our hair comes out of our scalp as Black women. That wearing something like twists is unprofessional. That we can choose to show up if we have tattoos, if we have piercings, because none of that has anything to do with our skills and capability and intellect. But the fact that we have to fight these battles still in 2023 says that our freedom to make a choice is absolutely still there. But the consequences of those choices are not only infringing upon some of those freedoms of choice, but also very much tied to old systems of patriarchy, right? Old systems of oppression, old systems of class and class separation. But if you are really standing in leadership, if you are really standing in the idea that leadership is not about you, it's about getting things done through, with, for, and by other people, right? Leadership is about guiding other folks to get things done. Then you recognize that because everyone has a choice, it is in your best interest and theirs to assist them in making choices that are in the best interest of the outcomes that are desired or the behaviors that are expected. But you also have a choice as a leader. How are you going to treat people? How are you going to show up? How are you going to address behaviors? How are you going to respond to failures or someone's lack of knowledge or someone's refusal to operate within the guidelines that have been set? What choice are you going to make as a leader in addressing those things? What choice are you going to make as a leader in terms of communicating and setting boundaries, as well as setting guidelines, setting expectations, training, developing, supporting, being an advocate, being a sponsor, being a coach and mentor? What choices are you going to make? What freedoms are you going to take to operate, right? I talk a lot about the importance of setting guardrails and guidelines and giving people freedom to operate within those guardrails and guidelines. The freedom to move, the freedom to explore, the freedom to gain experience and exposure, and the freedom to move in a space that still has a little bit of a safety net around it. The challenge we have today is there are very few spaces that are safe. As I work with my clients, one of the first things I say is, this is a safe space. Working with me is a safe space. It is a truthful and honest space. But the way in which we communicate and the way in which I will deliver your information back to you or insights back to you will be fraught with respect and dignity and compassion in order to help you move forward, not to hurt you or hinder you. But it is a safe space, and we have to create those psychologically and physically safe spaces in order for people to make choices that are the right choices for them and the right choices for the business. We need to allow them to have freedom to move, freedom to innovate, right? Which means freedom to fail. If we are not willing to allow people to fail, giving them space and grace for imperfection, we are not leading. If we are trying to take away choices, we are not leading. When we are less than forthcoming about the true agendas, we are not leading. That's why we see more and more in Texas, now all of the funding for state schools that have state funding, all of the funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion offices is gone. They have to shut down for state funding. Yet that was not publicized. That bill was covert going through the state house in Texas. That's leadership that is about hidden agendas that honestly aren't as hidden as they once were. That's leadership that is not about overall outcomes for everyone. Moving polling places, shutting down polling places. We see what happened in Alabama with the way they gerrymandered their maps, their redistricting maps. The same thing is happening in multiple states, including Texas. That is not leadership. That is taking away people's freedoms and choices, taking away their voices. And leaders set up guidelines and guardrails and enable people in psychologically and physically safe spaces to make choices. Elections have consequences. Choosing not to vote has consequences. Educating yourself on the issues of your business and of your politicians and of your society, that has consequences, especially if you don't educate yourself. But the beautiful thing is, when we have access to information, when we make a concerted effort to share truth and facts and reality and science, when we choose to share that information, when we choose to be open books, spreading information as opposed to banning books, we enable people to glean what they need from that information, to, yes, have their own and develop their own opinions, but to understand what truth is and what real facts are, where real science is, where real truth is, so that they can then own their own perspectives, their own opinions, and move forward to be true and authentic to who they are and deliver the best of the best that they can within the realm of their capabilities and their competencies. And by setting those guidelines and guardrails and giving grace and giving people freedom to operate, we also give them freedom to grow, to expand, to explore. When you think about those of you who have small children, right, as they grow up, or even I've talked about before, if you have pets, if you have not had children or have decided not to have children or have not been, that has not been your journey, think about the same with pets as well, right? You cordon off smaller spaces and then you give them more and more and more freedom as they're able to handle it. You give your employees and your teams more and more freedom as they're able to handle it. More and more space to roam as they're able to understand the details of the business and the necessities around the goals that you're trying to meet. More and more freedom to operate. It is true that technically in 2023, we are no longer enslaved persons, technically. It is true that in 2023, that there are more opportunities and more things open to those who were previously enslaved, or their ancestors of those, or the descendants of those who were previously enslaved. That is true. It is also true that there are many, many institutions that were built upon the backs of these enslaved people, and many, many institutions that are still set up to ensure that those who wield power never lose power, to ensure that the choices that folks make are limited at best, or at least the freedom to operate within an organization takes on a level of risk for some that is not there for others, that the freedom to operate carries much more danger for some than for others. That is also true in 2023. And yet, part of freedom, part of standing in freedom on this Freedom Day is knowing that we absolutely do have the freedom to make a choice, have a freedom to stand up and show up, have a freedom to lead people in a way that gives them grace and safety, and freedom to move and grow and learn and build, freedom to find true allies, freedom to challenge with respect and compassion, even if that same respect and compassion is not giving back. Because see, that's our karma and not theirs. Freedom to be who we need to be, and freedom to allow those who are looking to us to lead them to show up as they are, where they are, when they are, with doors wide open. Because there is genius in all of us. There is genius in absolutely every person that shows up to work for you, that shows up to support you, for whom you show up. There is genius everywhere. There is talent everywhere. There are gifts everywhere. And we can choose to acknowledge those and honor those. We have the freedom to accept differences. We have the freedom to honor differences. We have the freedom to take those differences and utilize those to be stronger and better and faster, to adjust our perspectives. Because how do we know our perspective is accurate if we never listen to, understand, or at least engage with others to find out what theirs is? We have in this day a freedom to decide how we're going to show up, to lead from a place of honor and compassion and truth and honesty. We have a choice. We have the freedom to be who we are. And we have the freedom to fight back against those things that are making it unsafe for some of us to be who we are. If you are leading, and leadership is about behavior, not about position, if you really consider yourself a leader, what choice are you making in how you are providing safe spaces for everyone who is looking to you to lead, to show up in their genius, authentically who they are, to be able to delve into those skills and aptitudes and everything that they can bring for you and for them. What choice are you making as a leader? And how are your choices creating consequences for others who are looking to you? So as we move through this Freedom Week, go back and examine how you're leading. Where are you creating freedom to operate for your folks? Where are you giving them space to make their own choices and to learn from and gain from the consequences of the choices they make? That it's not failure, it's learning. That it's not a mistake, it's an opportunity. That it's not the end of the world, but an opportunity to find the next greatest thing. Go back and think about it. Let me know what you came up with. Because in this day and age, we all need a little bit more freedom and a little bit more kindness and a little bit more opportunity to just be who we are and where we are, and a little bit more honesty. Show up. Be true to who you are, whatever that is, and be ready and willing and strong enough and capable enough and standing enough in your truth to own your perspective, your opinions, and the consequences of those. Have a phenomenal Freedom Week. I look forward to catching you guys next week. And I would like for you to keep an eye on my social. I have an announcement that's coming out, so hopefully you got to see the new refreshed Freedom release of laurelrutledge.com. I'm looking forward to catching up with all of you, and I will catch you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. You have been listening to the Rutledge Perspective Podcast. Thank you so much for downloading and for connecting. You can find previous episodes of the podcast on my website at laurelrutledge.com/podcast. You can also find me on social media at Laurel K. Rutledge and or The Rutledge Perspective. And I'd love your perspective on the things we talk about. And if there's a specific topic you want me to cover, just let me know. And please share this podcast with someone in your village who may need this little piece of perspective today. And if you're so inclined, I would really appreciate a 5-star rating and review on the platform of your choice. Apple Podcasts and Spotify reviews are particularly helpful. Thank you again for listening. Take care.